Good afternoon, my dear students. I hope this time will be successful laboratory class video. I hope you do remember last time we have foiled this. It was really epic fail with laboratory class in Google Meet because internet didn't work in class. So we are recording beforehand this video. Laboratory class about mounting the jig by mounting standard this time. And what do you see all these 30 minutes that I'm talking about nothing? On the left, you see assembly jig, and jig is a blue frame with silver color locators. Inside of these silver color locators, you might see it's called mounting standard, special mock-up which has both, do pay attention, has both templates of contour, templates of cross-section actually. They are called templates of jig in this case. And it also has so-called gauges of junctions. One gauge, the whole gauge actually consists of one place with fork type, another place with fork type, and third place with fork type. Now, some things are not finished on purpose. As you might see here, we have non-finished element of mounting standard. What it's for, we will talk a bit later. Do pay attention also that on the right, you had already seen it. You have almost exact copy of the wing or stabilizer, seems like. And you have quite the same, seems like, assembly jig. Very similar, yes, but not correct in this case. What we are talking about? Yellow one is so-called standard of surface. Standard of surface, a surface standard, it's full scaled mock-up, supposed to be. In our class, of course, it's little. Everything is toyish, you understand. And this standard, it's made either of wood, like in our case, or it's made of plastic. It's repeat all the surface of the aggregate because it's done exactly for aggregate. It's carry, it has axes, it has marking. They are looks like hairlines, marking of main elements of this wing. Let's call it wing. And what else it has? No any place we might see with junctions. It's repeat only outer surface with very high accuracy, and on the surface it has some graphical information. That's it. In contrary to this one, it's repeat not all the surface, it's mounting standard. And it's repeat only the places which we need really in assembly jig, and it's repeat contours in some places, and it's repeat junctions in some places. What the junction for? It's now I'm showing you so-called jigging plate, and you see perimeter of holes here, perimeters of holes which are future GBH holes. And I hope you do remember the jigging plate is a special locator of jig for flange junction. Once again, people, on the left we have assembly jig and mounting standard, which was used to mount this assembly jig. On the right, the yellow one, what do we have? Seems like it's assembly jig. It's not assembly jig. We see surface standard and we see counter standard to this surface standard, which actually very similar to assembly jig. Actually, it's the same assembly jig by design. Besides, of course, of this place is absent, but it's supposed to be here also later. And the difference between the left one and right one in accuracy. Usually I use such example. Do you imagine that is your yellow one, surface standard. It's your grandfather. What do we have as this counter standard? It's grandfather. What we have as red one, it's father, and the last one is already a son. It means that they are all relatives, and each next one is a derivative from the previous. First is surface standard, yellow one, next counter standard, next mounting standard, and the final one is assembly jig. Everything this was done in order to copy with very high accuracy the surface standard onto assembly jig. You might say it's too much complicated. Yes, it's too much complicated if we mean the only assembly jig and if we mean only assembly jigs. And what I'm talking about, above the all, I hope you do remember, where we have junctions, it means that we are joining something else here. For instance, to the wing, we are joining aileron, we are joining flaps, and maybe they assembled in another assembly jig. These so-called married jigs, supposed to be mated aggregates, supposed to be married jigs, as it's called in English, they must be coordinated. It's also quite real English terminology. They must be coordinated by the places of these junctions. They must give the same results corresponding to each other. Flap should be attachable, assemblable to the wing, and after assembling, they must have all the functionality. Next, besides of the need in marrying of assembly jig, marrying is let's say common language, and we need to use technical language, coordination. So besides of needing coordination of some jigs for the same aggregate, we also have idea and we have a need about coordination of tooling for manufacturing the parts and tooling for assembling. Tooling for manufacturing the parts here immediately we can't see, but we may imagine. For instance, we need bending punches for outer skin, or we need punches or form blocks for inner elements like ribs. And contours of all these tooling, they must give results which are assemblable with very high accuracy. They are coordinated, must be. And next, after everything, each element of the structure is produced, they must give results coordinated to locators of assembly jig. Yes, it's final accuracy, it's assembly jig which determine final accuracy, yes. But if all the previous tooling was systematically wrong, and in serial manufacturing it gives you systematically wrong results, you are spending too much money, time, labor forces in order to fix the problem that has appeared because you did wrong parts. Do forgive me. Now, what is laboratory work procedure? Actually, in laboratory work technological process, you're supposed to write only the mounting of assembly jig. We usually explain you since beginning how to produce everything, but next it's resulted in your mistakes that you, instead of the little portion that you're supposed to finish in your technological process in the lab, you start from the grandfather. In order to prevent your mistake, let's imagine that we already have their mounting standard completely finished. How exactly it will be finished, we are not talking right now. And this finished mounting standard is placed in a shop near assembly jig. Assembly jig now consists of this blue frame, and blue frame has completely empty, they are called barrels. Now to pay attention, for instance here, you see empty metal pipe. This empty metal pipe has special holes, what they are for. And this empty metal pipe may be inserted with another elements which in a jig now should be placed correctly, but we don't know where they are. Pay attention, quite the same things you see here, but because the jig was already assembled, you see that they are filled with something. Pay attention, it's visible, people. It's visible that here we have so-called fork, we have this barrel, and between fork and barrel we have something else. This something else is a cement. Wait a second. I hope everything goes okay. And now you see the real one, these real forks that you just have seen in such position, but you see that they are not inserted anywhere. Their tails empty, no, because it was already in use. You see, no? Tail from this side, it's spoiled, stuffed, do call it as you wish, with cement. Next, it was a little bit painted in real jig. These are real. You see that they are much bigger than the toyish ones that you had in a jig. No, visible, I hope. No? And do imagine the real jig locator. It will be placed somewhere here. And question is, how to place all these locators in correct position in order their outer contours of these locators give you correct outer surface of this wing by attaching to the mounting standard. But do pay attention also, it's visible where I have dropped the pen. It's visible here. One of locators is not finished yet, no? Like it was with mountain standard, not finished. One of locators not finished. How jig actually work at all? You see this pin is removable, easy removable. In our jig we have pins everywhere, at the bottom, at the top, but in real jig usually only one side is with pins and another has permanent hinge, for instance, screw, bolt and nut. It's openable, and do imagine that all this side is openable. And after you open it on one side, you may either locate something in the jig or you may remove ready item in a jig. So at the beginning, once again, we have the frame with empty barrels. We have no these elements, whether they will be joined next to with bolts or bolts and pins supposed to be, or they are also joined using the cement, they are yet absent. This element, jigging plate, also is absent. And contour locators and forks, they are separately placed near the jig. Contour locators, they are not even finished. You see, it does not repeat all the surface. What for? In order, as I said you, we copy the outer contours of locators from mounting standard. What to start this procedure? First, imagine no any support. No, you see now that that mounting standard is rested on the special, they are called reference platforms. And no these reference platforms yet, once again, and seems like there is no place to place mounting standard. You may only hang it and like stay in the air. What should we do? We may use so-called temporary supports. In real life, usually it comes either about screw jacks, special devices, screw-type devices which may support some carry some cargo, or it comes about wooden bars even. Elementary pieces, wooden bars, wooden bricks, which easy to find everywhere. And what is our idea? Just place mounting standard inside the jig frame, which is empty yet, I hope you do remember. Place it on the wooden supports and fix it somehow to the frame of the jig. What does it mean somehow? Again, either with special screw clamps or even with belts. It would be hanged on belts in this case. And mounting standard is located, or you may say placed, in the frame of assembly jig on these wooden supports or on any technological supports, and fixed with any technological clamps in some predetermined position. This position is predetermined in a special drawing, which is called mounting scheme of assembly jig. It's one of drawings of the set of drawings of assembly tooling. So if we have a need to produce the assembly jig, besides of assembly jig drawings, assembly drawing, and but least besides of the drawings, so-called work drawing of the elements, we will have additional documents. At least it will be mounting scheme which explain how you're going to assemble the jig or to mount the jig. So in mounting scheme we see where mounting standard should be, and with accuracy plus minus some millimeters we place it, but it's not so great accuracy as it's necessary to assemble the jig as a whole. When it comes about the accuracy of jig, it comes about plus minus 0.1, plus minus 0.5 accuracy of outer contours. And here we're just placing, as I said, you mounting standard with accuracy plus minus couple of millimeter. Located on the temporary support, clamped by temporary support. What is next? Next, actually, you may start already procedure of jig mounting, but what is the function of this mounting standard? First time ever for assembly jig, to mount assembly jig by the mounting standard. Attach all the elements to the mounting standard, fix them in some predetermined position, and next remove mounting standard and you have assembly jig. Great. But how long you going to use this assembly jig? Maybe some years. How you going to check this jig in a year of its work, especially if it was intensive work? Maybe you need to check it each month. How? No, maybe you need to compare it with the previous carrier of all the sizes. You need to compare it to the mounting standard. How you may know where it was the first ever time when you need to place it here second time, third time, and so on during some years? Either you need to come to measuring, or you have to have some places in assembly jig which you may just place mounting standard onto to repeat its the very first position in this assembly jig. Such places are reference platforms. Once again, for first time they are not necessary. They are necessary only when you'd like to place mounting standard in assembly jig, for instance, for inspection, for second time, fifth time, maybe 100th time. And after we place it mounting standard on temporary supports, we work with these reference platforms. Pay attention that as mounting standard, as surface standard, they have these special places, something like legs, with reference platforms of this tooling itself. I did not say it today yet, that both mounting standard, counter standard, surface standard, they are tooling of second order. They are secondary tooling. Actually, they are primary tooling, but they are tooling of second order because they are never work with real parts. They are tooling which is necessary to create another tooling. Now, once again, how are we going to locate everything in a jig? By attaching to mounting standard. How we may find position of these reference platforms of jig, exact position, if they are not exist now? We may attach them to mounting standard either. So we do it. Next step, after mounting standard is placed and fixed, attach, locate the reference platform. How we may attach it? It has special holes, you see, it's also... Sorry. It has special hole, and this hole is next fixed with a pin, with a special technological pin of very high accuracy. That is why it's moved so difficult. And attach a reference platform of the jig to the reference platform of mounting standard. Clamp it with special high quality pin. What is next? It's in correct position, but this correct position now it's fixed only with a pin. And as only you remove pin, for instance, to remove mounting standard, reference platform of jig is not fixed to the jig. So what is next step? After attaching and clamping of reference platform of assembly jig to mounting standard reference platform, next you need to join with permanent joining any fasteners or cement, join reference platform of assembly jig to the frame of assembly jig. And repeat it for all the places with reference platforms. Typically not less than 3 such points. It may be more, but not less than 3. Next. What is next? Next, we suppose to wait if we have used cement, or we may continue immediately if we use fasteners like bolts and pins. But what is next? I need your imagination. Assembly jig now looks like the frame, this blue one, mounting standard, wooden supports, belts, and reference platforms. What we should do next? We need to remove all the wooden supports, reference belts, all the technological temporary clamps. We should remove everything this in order to release mounting standard from all the unnecessary relations. In order, mounting standard rested only on these reference platforms. Now, I hope you do remember about residual stresses and other things that may change a bit positions of elements after you have produced it. In order to make sure that mounting standard not limited with anything else, we remove all the temporary supports, leave it only on reference platforms, and now we're ready to continue the procedure of mounting the jig. Usually you see that these elements, locators of contours, they are, let's say, interfering. They don't give normal access to another elements like these locators of junctions we need to place. Here is locator of junction for flat junction. It's called jigging plate. That one, it's locator of that one, black one, is locator of I-type junction. I hope you do remember that gauge is a tooling. Gauge belongs to the mounting standard, and what is belong to the jig, it's called locator. So usually we start working exactly with locator of junctions. Moreover, this locator is supposed to be even more accurate than locators of contours, usually. Now, what should we do? Next, you will see that text of technological process, that procedure of locating, procedure of mounting. It's repeated. It's identical to what we did to the reference platforms. It will be 2 magic words each time. No, 3 magic words. Attach, clamp, join to the assembly jig frame. Now, attach locator of junction, attach locator of junction of I-type to gauge at mounting standard or to gauge of mounting standard. Or better to use, of course, word locate. What does it mean locate in this case? What our bases are? No, I will not unscrew this, but I hope you see. We see a hole, and this hole, joint ball hole, GBH hole, in real structure will be. This hole is the most important in all this locator. So first we align the holes in gauge and this locator of contour. Next, also we have surfaces here. You see it with significant clearance. You might see I use pen on purpose. You may assess the clearance. Of course, in real life, it's not like this. I will show you next real jig in order you to notice the difference, let's say. And first, align the hole, no? And in the process of aligning of this hole, of course, you also attach it to one of surfaces, align surfaces. It's to the matter about the basis of this assembly jig. One of the base is, once again, axis of GBH. axis of GBH, and another base is one of these inner surfaces. So attach or locate locator of GBH, locator of fork type to the gauge of mounting standard, clamp it with special technological fastener. Maybe it's a special high quality pin, maybe it's special bolt with nut. Next, join to the frame of jig. And here we start the story about cements. Now, to compare, for instance, what we did. Not we did, but someone did here and here. And let's try to imagine what is the difference in labor input of the joining. What looks like the joining with cement. In this case, it's enough only to insert syringe with cement, special cement, easy hardenable cement, this NIAT mountain cement, it's called. NIAT, it's a scientific institute of aviation technologies. And cement compound you already have seen in your laboratory manual by this moment. What do we have? Once again, we have syringe, do imagine, syringe with cement, inserted here, push the button, in some seconds you have all the barrel filled with cement, and you just need to wait literally 15 minutes. 15 minutes, and after 15 minutes it's already frozen enough, and it doesn't flow out. What about this place? As you do remember, when it comes about the accurate joining, it means that bolts are not enough. Whether bolts or screws are not enough. It means that you need to make holes there. With this thread must be for screws, or at least high quality holes for bolts in order to tighten the nut from backside. But before you do it, you also need to do holes for pins. They are not presented in this laboratory toy, but pins are necessary to locate everything with very high accuracy. And you do remember certainly that drilling, it's rough operation. It's give you, no, in the better case, it's 12 quality grade, international quality grade. Typically, it's 14 international quality grade. It means that if you need to do hole with high accuracy, you have to drill it. Next, to bore this hole or to countersink this hole with special countersinkers. Actually, also they look like drills, but they have more cutting blades. Couple of times of countersinking for each holes, and no less than 3-4 times of reaming for each hole for pin. And all this take you or take your employee time. No. Maybe it comes about half an hour for each such a place. And to compare, making permanent joint with a syringe, and this one, where you have a need in drill bit, or sometimes countersinkers, some reamers, you need high qualified employee, and you need electrical energy to fulfill all this. So certainly that is more easy in mounting, and it's no less reliable. That is proven with all our experience, at least for last 70 years maybe. That is why we're using the cement. But we would insist, as you'd like. You may use screws, bolts, pins, as you'd like. What is next? After you made locators. No, don't forget that we have one locator, we have another locator. After you did this, you at least should write that repeat items number for another locators. We still have need in locator, which is called jigging plate. Once again, pay attention what it looks like. You see perimeter of holes here, GBH holes. But do pay attention, there is no any attempt from this side to repeat these holes. Moreover, in this place, certainly the mounting standard is unfinished. Why? Because it's not located, this jigging plate, by all the GBH holes. Now, it would be too much. It's located only by 2 base holes. These holes, which on the axis of the wing, base holes, which comes either from first ever 3D model of wing, or in our previous periods of history of aerospace manufacturing, they were immediately in theoretical loft for first time ever. And these holes are used as basis for locating the jigging plate to mounting standard. So mounting standard has base hole of high accuracy and jigging plate has base hole of high accuracy. How base hole has appeared in jigging plate? No, it's another story. I hope you do remember about mother plate, which is called master plate, and which is mother for two jigging plates. For this jig, which repeats the wing, and for another jig, for instance, for center wing section, or maybe it was fuselage, depending on what this jig is going to be joined to the fuselage or to the center wing. So master plate is necessary to produce jigging plate first, two jigging plates, couple of jigging plates for one wing and for the place which it will be joined to. And the mounting standard, or at least gauge of junctions, it's necessary to find position of the jigging plate in a jig while mounting. How we finding position? Once again by base holes. Remind you what we have already done. First, it was a frame completely empty, without any element besides all this empty, without cement, without forks, barrels. Next, we place it here, mounting standard, on temporary supports and clamp it with temporary clamps like belts or some other clamps to the frame of jig, mounting standard in the very first position. Next step was attaching of jig reference platform to the reference platform of mounting standard, joining them temporarily with special high quality pin. And next it was clamping process of reference platform of jig to the reference platform of mounting standard. It was permanent joining to the frame, as you'd like, whether with cement or with pins and screws or bolts. Don't forget that in this case, in your technological process will be different tooling. What is next? Next, we are working with locating and mounting of locators of holes, GBH holes, locators of hinges. First, locate fork type locators of jig at their gauge of mounting standard by GBH in gauge of mounting standard and surface now in gauge of mounting standard. Next, clamp it. Located means align holes, no? At least holes and surfaces. Next, clamp it. Clamp it, it means that you're inserting here either technological screw and nut or special high quality pin. Clamp it and make permanent joint of locator of this type to the frame of the jig, to this place. Repeated for second locator. Next, locate jigging plate at the mounting standard gauge by what? By base hole, by this one, by that one. Next, clamp it with technological pins or technological screws. Clamp jigging plate to the mounting standard gauge. And finally, do a permanent joint of jigging plate to the frame of assembly jig via cement or using the nuts and pins, or bolts, nuts and pins, depends on you. Finally, what do we have? We have already the jig with locators of junctions, but we still have not located locators of contour. What are locators of contours? Remind you, those things, these silver-like things, they are locator of contours. Moreover, as we have agreed before, locators of contours, they are not even finished yet. May you imagine? So first task for us is to decide how we're going to finish them. How we may finish them. Now let's imagine that somehow we placed it here in the jig. Somehow already place it. Next, in order to finish this contour, we are going to use special cement once again. Oh, here it's even scratched a bit by nails of our students. Not visible, but normally, I hope better visible. It's so-called polymer cement. It's epoxy resin with some additions, a compound also, you know. Lacquer itself, it may be done of, it may be made of wood, it may be made of aluminum alloys, depends on how much expensive manufacturing you have. And finishing of this contour is fulfilled immediately during mounting of jig, usually, if we use this method of mounting. How? We place it somehow in this position, but it still have gap, you see. All over this contour, it has a gap with respect to the template of the mounting standard. What is next? You need to clamp it also either to the frame of assembly jig permanently or to the mounting standard temporarily. And next, your task is to fill it with cement. Yes, but the cement may flow out a bit. In order to prevent it, you need to place here so-called technological plates. I can't show it in some another way except of my whole hand, with my palms. Do imagine that you place it here, couple of plates, and fix it them both on lacquer and on the mounting standard. These plates cover all the clearance that you have to fill, and these plates also, they have holes, something similar. Oh, forgive me, it's difficult to operate even with hand, watching to the screen instead of real life objects. Also, it has special holes, and through these special holes, you are going to fill it with this epoxy resin. Well, in general, it looks like this. And after epoxy resin is frozen in some minutes, you may remove these plates, and lacquer seems like it's finished. You may leave it in this position, better of course leave it in this position. You may open it. By the word, it was epoxy resin. It made adhesive joint here, yes, but maybe it's also made adhesive joint to the mounting standard. Yes, it's made. If we forget to cover mounting standard preliminary with special anti-adhesive material, it may be a technical Vaseline, it may be any oil, mineral oil usually, or it may be a special film, and this film protecting mounting standard, preventing adhesion of epoxy resin to the mounting standard instead of adhesion to lacquer. Now let's repeat it in more formal way. I said we need to place lacquer and fix it somehow to the frame of jig, for instance. How we may do it? I hope you do remember these barrels were empty, and what we do? We place lacquer here first. Align lacquer with the template. Clamp it to the template somehow with temporary screw clamps. Hang fork type connector, it's called connector, this fork, or eye bolt you may call it if you'd like. In Western countries it's more probably called eye bolt. You may call this fork type connector, you may call it eye bolt connector, but do use the same name each time, please. Hang connector onto the hole, it's so-called mounting hole and mounting hole. Align these holes in connector and in lacquer, clamp it with the pin as we did before, where the pin has disappeared. Here is. And repeat the same procedure. Clamp pin and join connector permanently to assembly jig. So in previous cases, it was lacquer, attach, join, lacquer, clamp, join, attach, lacquer by attaching, clamp in this position and join to the jig. Attach, lacquer, clamp in this position, join to assembly jig frame. Attach to the mounting standard, clamp, by base hole in this case, and make a joint to the assembly jig. In case of locators of contour, procedure is broken, you see, upside down. Да? First, we join finally locator in some predetermined position to frame of assembly jig, and next we are going really to locate it. Not to locate, but finish its contour. Once again, place locator in a jig approximately to mounting standard surface, to the place which you need to repeat. Next, hang, clamp it onto mounting standard. Hang I-type connector to locator of jig, clamp it with pin, make permanent joint to assembly jig, and wait for 15 minutes if it comes about cement. It means wait exactly for this locator which we are working with, but until it's continue to freeze, we may work already with next locator, next, and so on. In contrary to what we have if we use screws. If you use screws and pins, you are permanently busy. You are dealing with drilling, with countersinking, and so on, and your hands are not empty. You can't work next until you didn't finish this. In this case, you did something and waiting, but it doesn't mean that you are not working at this time. You may work with the next one. Next. After you did it, what is next? Oil mounting standard, preliminary, better, of course. Oil mounting standard to protect it. Oil, it means grease it, not oil maybe to say, grease. Grease the surface of mounting standard templates or protect it with film to prevent adhesion to locator of contour. Attach from both of sides of template of mounted contour technological plates with holes. Clamp them. Next, through the holes in technological plates, fill the special compound which is supposed to repeat the contour, like you see. Instead of empty plates, we will have the whole contour coinciding to the contour of mounting standard. Fill it with special cement. Wait 15 minutes, remove the technological plates. Repeat for all another locators. Next, after you did it, what is the last stage of your work? You need open all the, at least one side, locators of contours, remove them, open them. No, what does it mean open? You have seen. I'm just opening the side in order you may remove something from jig. Next, remove clamps from gauges and locators of junctions. And here also don't forget, remove pins or another clamps from reference platforms. And what we did it all for? To remove mounting standard from jig. One more note, let it be, to this process. Do you imagine that we place it the very first time, as I said, we place it mounting standard onto reference platforms, future reference platforms of jigs, that one. And do you imagine that we have used cement? Cement has time of freezing 15 minutes, but time of final setting, including all the sizes, it's around 3 days. And what is this important note? If you place it here, mounting standard, and join it reference platforms with cement, you have to wait 3 days after this procedure in order to start next activity, like making the locators of contours, locators of junctions, whatsoever. If it comes about cement here, you should wait for 3 days for final setting of the cement. Next, you are removing temporary supports, and so on and so forth. If you use screws or pins in this joint, no need to wait. You just working. After you have finished this place, you may continue with mounting standard. Well, actually, we have already assembled our jig. Once again, in very large steps. What we did? Inside of empty frame, do place mounting standard, this red one. To the mounting standard, legs with reference platform. Attach reference platform of jig, clamp to the mounting standard, and now create permanent joint to the assembly jig of these platforms. Once again, remind you, these platforms are not necessary for first time. They are necessary to find position of mounting standard for second time, and all other times you're going to bring it here, for instance, to check the jig. Next step, locate or attach to the gauge of mounting standard the junction locator, clamp it with technological fasteners, and join junction locator to the frame of jig. When it was fork type locator, locating was on the GBH hole and surfaces. When it was jigging plate, locating was on base hole and surface of the gauge. What is next? Next is place non-finished locator of contour to the mounting standard and clamp it temporarily. Next, hang fork type locators or eye bolts to locator of contour, clamp it with pins, and make permanent joint of connector, locator in turn, to the frame of assembly jig. After you did it, you may continue finalizing of your locators. How? Attach grease mounting standard to protect it against adhesion. Attach technological plates from both of sides of the silver color locator. Clamp technological plates to locator. Fill the clearance, the gap between locator. Where is my pen? Between locator and between mounting standard, fill it with cement. Wait for 15 minutes, remove technological plates, continue the work with the next locator until you finish all the locators. What is finally? After you have finished everything, you need to open one side of the jig, at least one side of the jig, remove pins and open locators. You need to remove temporary clamps from locators of junctions, and you need to remove temporary clamps from reference platforms. What for? Remove mounting standard from assembly jig. Assembly jig is ready to start work. Great. It was story about how to mount the jig itself. But question still is, why we need all this yellow stuffs, another blue stuff, and so on? Why we need it for? Once again, remind you that it does not come about one assembly jig. It's a family of assembly jigs, and this family of assembly jig has so-called merit places, coordinated places. Now, for instance, like the jig for center wing. Center wing will contact to the wing at this place. The jig for aileron, and maybe it's flap, maybe it's aileron, maybe it's flaperon, whatsoever. The family of jigs for the same airplane, and they all have places which coincide to each other, first. And secondly, all these jigs should give results which are coordinated by theoretical outlines also. Plus to this, if it comes only about assembling, it's enough to have family of mounting standards in this case. Plus to this, we have a need to produce all the tooling for parts manufacturing, and these parts, they have also complex outlines. And it's inconvenient, it's extremely inconvenient, at least before appearing of numerical control machining. It was available only by hands to do these contours, yes? Inconvenient to measure such contours. That is why better to produce such contours by molding, by copying principle, not by measuring principle. This approach was realized in this idea that first we do full-scale model of airplane. However, while it's sound now, yes, they did. And even in a movie about Boeing 747, you might see, I hope you have seen already, full-scaled wooden mock-ups. Full-scaled wooden mock-ups of Boeing 747 and full-scaled wooden mock-up of passenger supersonic aircraft, which never was produced after in America, but it was designed and it was technologically prepared already, potentially, as they handed that mock-up. It means that they have already started manufacturing preparation, lead time. But they stopped because they understood they be in competition with Europe and Soviet Union, and Soviet Union has produced its Tupolev 144. Europe has produced Concorde by that moment, and Americans already understood that these supersonic passenger aircraft, they are not economically rational. They are ecologically harmful, they are too expensive, so on and so forth. They decided to stop this program, passenger supersonic aircraft. But they had wooden mock-up, and you might see it in a movie, as I said. So we do mock-up either wooden or made of plastics, and this mock-up will be copied in two different ways. This surface may be copied, the whole surface, to repeat it in the tooling for manufacturing the punch, for instance, bending punches for skin, tooling for parts manufacturing. And on other hand, it may be copied, but not the surface as a whole. We don't need the whole surface, as we need only some locators. It will be copied to these contours of jig and to junctions of jig might be copied. But there is no junctions, do pay attention. It's a problem. So what they do? Very similar to what we did in the jig. After surface standard system, family of surface standard, for wing, for center wing, for fuselage, for everything, they made. Next, they are placed together, like assembled together as mock-up of the whole aircraft, wooden mock-up. Check it, inspect it. If everything is perfect, then they are dismantled, disattached to the separate aggregate surface standards, and we continue work with them. When it comes, each time we use molding principle, attaching something and coping by molding principle, by casting practically. Whether it comes about casting with sand glue mess, for instance, or it comes about epoxy resin or some another kind of cement, doesn't matter. It's just molding. You have something what is liquid, and makes this liquid became either polymerizing, or it became hard. No, like sand glue mess, for instance. Да? Так, what is next? Surface standard, place it in frame of counter standard. This time it's called counter standard, not a jig. Contours of surface standards, they are copied to non-finished locators of counter standard. You see the same story, yes? The same story. It means that surface standard should be greased somehow or protected with the film. These locators, they are placed first to the surface standard and clamped temporarily. Next, we clamp them with permanent joint to the frame of jig via through these fork type connectors. What is next? Why fork type connectors? Because they should be removable. We'd like to, time to time, we'd like to, which one is openable better? We'd like to open and close them time to time, yes? That is why we use these connectors, not permanent joints. Why we need to open them time to time? Remind you, we need to locate something inside and to remove something. If they are not movable, it's not possible to remove the whole item. Separate elements you may insert inside, but as a whole, you are not able to remove it next. Так, what is next? After we did this counter standard, this thing, but it still has no these junctions, remind you. Remove surface standard from counter standard. What for? Because we are going to place here this red frame with non-finished locators, templates of mounting standard, as you might see. And these things these gauges, they are also yet either not joined at all or they are not finished. We have no place to copy it from, yes? Next, to the gauge. To the gauge, do forgive me. To the counter standard, to this one frame. We are placing the frame of mounting standard, which is not finished once again. What for? Now, in contrary, we are going to copy from locators of counter standard, which are finally manufactured now, contours to templates of mounting standard, which are not finally manufactured by this moment. So we finalize, we are finishing everything in mounting standard when it comes about contour, but we are not able to make gauges here, no? Because, remind you, there are no gauges in counter standard yet. What we do next? After we finish all the contours of mounting standard in the counter standard, we remove mounting standard, and once again, you have the whole family of these mounting standards. And like it was with these yellow things, with surface standards, you do the same to the mounting standard. You bringing them all together in one place, assembling them together, aligning them, checking their outer contours, technical inspection, and not in terms coincide, not coincide. It's something like procedure of leveling, where you align them in proper position, locate them with respect to each other. And now you are finishing all the gauges, even in assembly with another mounting standard. No, preliminary, of course, you did something by using measuring this time, not copying, no place to copy from. And after you preliminary did something like rough gauge, you finalize them in assembly with another mounting standards. In case of our wing, remind you, we need to join mounting standard of wing to the center wing mounting standard. It will be some another mock-up. And to the flap or aileron mounting standard, it's already third mock-up. So altogether, this system of mounting standards, it's checked. It's assembled together, checked. If necessary, it's a bit changed in order to provide accuracy and functionality of all the elements. And next is dismantled, deattached again. All these procedures is extremely important and it's necessary. What it's for? It's necessary to make coordinated, coordinated gauges at the mounting standard in each particular mounting standard. After this, mounting standard comes back to its father, to the counter standard. And what for? No, question is why? In order, next time, when you'd like to check mounting standard in turn, you may check by this counter standard, you may check only outer contours if you have these locators, yes? And in order second time, third time, and so on, you able to check mounting standard gauges after you place it mounting standard, finish it in counter standard, remove it, familiarize, let's say, them with another mounting standard, did everything already, it's finally mounting standard. You bring in this final mounting standard to finish this counter standard. And in counter standard will appear locators of gauges very similar to what we have in a jig, but they will have another accuracy, higher accuracy. Now, and that's it. The family of tooling is ready. Surface standard, counter standard, and mounting standard. And after this, we may start manufacturing of jig. And once again, mounting standard, the same, may be used for producing of some identical jigs. No, for instance, you need to cover a great program of manufacturing, and it's not enough for you, the only jig for wing assembling. You need 5 in order to be on time with all your program. These 5 jigs, they may be assembled, mounted by the same mounting standard. In this case, they give extremely close results. Interchangeability of wings that produce it in such wings in such jigs is extremely high. Next, mounting standard will be used for checking the jig contours, both and gauges of the jig, or forgive me, locators of contours of the jig, periodically in some period of time. And in order time to time to check mounting standard itself, whether it's yet correct or not, you are bringing mounting standard into counter standard. And in counter standard, you may check mounting standard. And in turn, once again, if you'd like to check mounting standard, you are referring to the surface standard. No, of course, only by surfaces. Extremely complicated procedure, extremely long in pre-production, in lead time, and extremely expensive, especially when it comes about big airplanes. And as I said, before appearing of numerical control machining, we had no another choice practically when it comes about high speeds, when it comes about the high accuracy demands, only mounting standards. But with the appearing of CNC machining, it became a little bit easier to prepare manufacturing. And not in all cases we even have high demands to accuracy, because demands to accuracy depends on the speed airplane flies. And when it comes about fighters, or when it comes about the places like cockpits or places with control surfaces at the rear contour of the wing, even by now, we still use this mounting standard method. Another story is that mounting standard, surface standard, or even mounting standard itself, it's maybe not produced by so long procedure. It's maybe produced certainly not from lofts and templates. It's produced already by CNC machining, because such surface standard manufacturing, this yellow zinc manufacturing out of wood, it's also extremely complicated procedure. Like we have lofts, next we have rough frame and very exact, very accurate templates, assemble everything together, fill it with special compound, or stuff it with wood, next we polish it. It's literally some weeks for each of them. And it's maybe done only with very high qualified employees. So in this case, decision like to use CNC machine, of course, it's some solution for this problem, at least to produce the surface standard. But anyway, if you'd like to do assembly jig you can't produce immediately by CNC machine because of design of assembly jig, because of sizes of assembly jig. It's not possible. It's possible, yes, but it would be extremely inconvenient and it would be too much expensive. Once again, about advantages of this method of jig mounting: very high accuracy of results and very high interchangeability of results. Reliability of this technique is extreme. Accuracy of mounting the jig, in this case, that you are going to calculate by the word in one of task of your laboratory work, is up to plus minus 0.3 millimeters. It's great thing. On other hand, it's long and extremely expensive technique of manufacturing the jig. And expensity, in this case, it's like a rewarding, let's say, if you need to meet high accuracy demands, like fighters, for instance, especially supersonic fighters. If it comes about the places with specific demands to accuracy, like cockpit or some other places in the aircraft, even in passenger aircraft, it may be, especially if it's supersonic or high-speed passenger aircraft. Actually, I said everything, I hope.